Solidarity curtains.
Oh,
Oh, there they are. Okay, I see them now. Look at that. Amazing. I love it.
yes.
Oh, great.
Love to see it.
Oh, shit balls.
Yeah. We because of the computer facing this way, it's not catching all of you.
Good.
Well, I'm
That's-
fine.
that's not-
I don't mind being
that's just
on
not.
camera.
Yes, you should. You should.
What?
Because you're the lovely man you married once.
Oh yeah, that crazy.
Yeah, that guy.
Well,
Don't say paranoid or anything.
Well, I am. I do have
shut
paranoia
up.
sometimes,
Very not.
but I'm fine.
Stop telling me. I know you are.
welcome to
Just say
Northern
it.
Lights Spiritual Center. Northern Lights is a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Northern Lights Spiritual Center offers practical and spiritual tools to make positive changes in our lives. So we acknowledge our presence here on the traditional and unceded lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and coastal Salish peoples. These people are still here, and we join with them in how they continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. We seek to resist the erasure of Indigenous histories as we work towards honoring and inviting the truth. Our opening song is called In This Very Room by Ron and Carol Harris. Please join in as you like, or just be sung to. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room.
It's not nice.
Good morning.
And this is a time on Sundays when we set aside for a brief meditation, a time when we can ground ourselves and settle into where we are, releasing everything and anything that's come before this moment, allowing yourself to be present for yourself in this moment. Because this is about you, about being centered and taking care of yourself. And so this morning, as you can see, the candle burning, I invite us to, first of all, take in a couple of deep breaths, allowing the breath to come in to fill your diaphragm and releasing anything that's not needed in the body. And so let's take a nice deep breath in. And release. And you can be audible about it too. Sometimes that makes it more powerful. So breath in. And release. One more time. Breath in. And release. So this morning, I invite us to focus on the candle. One way to do that is to just barely squint your eyes so that other things around it are out of the picture. And while focusing on this candle, sending out love and kindness and support for what's going on in Europe, mostly for the Ukrainian people. Recognizing the lives that have been lost, the people that are fleeing their homeland. Because by giving support and focusing on them, it's like the butterfly effect. So just be still for a few minutes and focus on that flame of life, the flame of light, the flame of love. We also invite you to, as the week moves forward, I invite you, if you choose, to just hold them in our hearts, in our minds, in our prayers, for the perfect outcome. And so with that, I invite you back to the room. To knee your toes, fingers if you choose, and open your eyes. And so it is. Now for the reading for today. It's a couple articles from the internet. And it has to do with playfulness. And playfulness is a spiritual practice. Playfulness, it's hard to say, is a reverse martial art, a peaceful art, the art of peace itself. Play is a thing of the spirit. Playfulness spiritual practice. Toys and games are like prayer wheels, more or less. More like player wheels, tools to hold your mind to free your soul. Play is without purpose. It is how we engage with our bodies, minds, and each other in the world. For the fun in it, the joy of it. Even if we were playing with money, truly playing, it is not so much for the money as it is for the freedom from money, for a connection to community. Even when we are playing to win, the real victory is in being part of, or just bearing witness to a moment of shared transcendence. Being playful is what we do to stay in play. Stay open, responsive, light, ready to engage or disengage at a moment as the moment dictates. Like playing with a puppy or a small child. Kind or reverse martial art, peaceful art. Being playful, the very understanding of the purpose of games is redefined. Games are no longer about winning or even about cooperating. They are all and only about celebrating our capacity for having fun together. Playfulness is a practice that shapes our souls. It connects us. It is an act of belief in ourselves. The vehicle whose wheels are powered by our faith in life, bringing us to places of wonder, moments of joy. It is almost the last thing to leave us before we leave altogether. Playfulness heals the spirit. This is by Bernard Lewis decoded. Playfulness is often one of the first things to disappear when people experience serious illness, not only for the person who is sick, but for the family as well. Play can be important for the patient and the family in getting back into the flow of life. It is particularly difficult to reclaim playfulness when there is serious illness. When people observe someone who is seriously ill and is being playful, they may say, "You aren't taking your illness serious enough." It is extremely difficult for members of the family. That is extremely difficult for members of the family. The wife who goes out with friends for a playful evening when her husband is home ill may hear comments such as, "How can you be out having a good time when your husband is homesick and dying?" Or the parent who goes out for an evening when a child is dying may feel guilt, not realizing that for the parent to nurture the child, the parent must take care of themselves and do those things that replenish their spirit, or else they become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. It is very difficult and important area when serious illness both for the person who is ill and the family. Play is spiritually healing. It heals the human spirit, the spirit of the sick, of the people who are caring for the sick. Caring, is fun. When depending on things like who's caring for whom and who's caring for the people who are doing the caring. But when it's fun, it's really deeply fun. Like it reaches the core, is what it does. When the person being cared for can relax in someone's hands. The relief, the release. Trust themselves to those hands. Trust those hands and the person who is at the other end of those hands, feeling the patient relax into their steady, caring hold. And your playful smile, your invitation to share a stupid joke, your banter, all so gentle, so playful, just loud enough, just at the right moment. An age is coming when machines will be able to do anything, but they will not be conscious. But how will we know a machine is not conscious? How do we know another human being is conscious? There's only one way, when it starts to play. In playfulness lies the highest expression of the human spirit. In playfulness lies the highest expression of the human spirit. And so it is.
Northern Light Spiritual Center is part of a larger organization called the Centers for Spiritual Living. And Centers for Spiritual Living is acknowledging play as a spiritual practice this particular month. So for this month, the talks, and Michael launched us with the readings, there'll be some conversation and some exploration about play. Each month I do a chant. So this month's chant is, I play when my heart picks the path and my time simply passes away. I play when my eyes hear the truth. And my route going forward is plain. I play when my eyes bask in beauty, or drink in beauty, and I know my duty to share and celebrate. I play today, I play today. So please join me as the tune becomes familiar, or just be sung to if that's what you prefer. The way I typically do the chant is the first time is with the pronoun I, second chant is with the pronoun you, third time is with the pronoun we, and we come back to I so that we can maybe feel it a little bit more deeply. I play when my heart picks the path and my time simply passes away. I play when my eyes ears hear the truth and my route simply forward is plain. I play when my eyes drink in beauty and I know my duty to share and celebrate. I play today. I play today. Now you play when your heart picks the path. Your time simply passes away. You play when your ears hear the truth and your route simply going forward is plain. You play when your eyes drink in beauty and you feel the duty to share and celebrate. You play today. So we typically have a song before talk, and today's song is going to focus on a story, the story of Jacob when he is wrestling with the divine, or wrestling with an angel. Oops. So I wanted to share that song to kind of set a theme, to set the space for the story of Jacob, and why is the story of Jacob significant and important with the notion of play, and how does play have anything to do with what's happening here and now? So I wanted to start with where we are here and now. We are at a time in the world where worldwide events have never been like this in 50, 60, 70 years. We haven't had a war in the middle of Europe. We haven't had shells targeting a nuclear facility. That's a new thing. And we have had instances where countries have been invaded. But it's very easy for the world to look away. So when Syria was invaded and the Syrian people fled, the response to that was to build walls made of razor wire fencing so that those people couldn't go anywhere, so that they could simply be subject to death. The response now is different. Countries are more receptive to the people who are fleeing, and people are fleeing because literally they don't have homes anymore. Their homes are being bombed. And for me to just launch into a Sunday talk without acknowledging that is a little bit like living in an alcoholic family, pretending that everything is great and we're all happy, and within that context, people take on different roles in the alcoholic family. There are the enablers who are like, how do we keep the alcoholic, or how do we keep the drug user happy? How do we keep them merrily on their way so they don't lash out and I don't become the target of their anger? And to a large extent, a lot of the world's response to Vladimir Putin is very much like the big alcoholic, grouchy patriarch of the family. He's like, I want this, and you're not giving it to me. And there's a level of appeasement because there's fear, there's genuine fear. I'm going to use my nukes, and you can't stop me. I'm going to destroy the world. So if I were to look at the fact that we are in crazy times, you would wonder, what the heck can I possibly get from a service here if the service isn't going to acknowledge what's going on? One of the things about the point of play and the story of Jacob is that despite everything that's happening, play and joy remain available to us. One of the things about this center comes from a teaching by a person named Ernest Holmes. And Ernest Holmes drew from different faith traditions and he pulled them together into what he hoped was kind of a reasonable idea. And what he proposed is, what if we are to live our lives like a scientific experiment? And with a scientific experiment, what we do is we set up particular proposals. We say, we're going to imagine this. We're going to imagine, so to do a scientific experiment, we say, we're going to explore, what do we do if we treat this circumstance with this response? In science of mind, it's the notion is, how might we use our minds, how might we use our hearts as way to guide how we respond to the world? So the notion is that power shifts from some all-powerful divine that is living up in clouds somewhere and has a little abacus and is keeping track of humanity and keeping track of everybody's good and bad, and then is occasionally raining down lightning to the people that have done badly and rewarding the people that have done well. What happens if we operate from the experiment that there isn't a divine that is far away. There is a divine that is within me. That which created all that can be seen and known is also operating. It's my very life right now. The breath that I am breathing in is God, is spirit, is divinity having life in this body right here and now. What happens if we experiment and just imagine that? I can't speak for what happens for others, but I can speak for myself. The notion that the divine is not something far away, but that the divine is within me, is my choice, has changed me. One of the things that I talked about this week, I'm a school psychologist, and I'm a leader for the school psychologists, and I lead the training that we do. We have a monthly training. And during the training with my small group, I talked about the fact that I have come to see myself when I'm with a family or when I'm with a student. I see myself as the school district that I'm working for. And why that's significant is that I let go of my notion as a victim of this school district. This school district that does sloppy, careless things. That kids can be mistreated, and families can be disregarded, and teaching practices can happen that, oh my God, really shouldn't happen. When I shift my position from that district is a bad place, and I'm trying to fight that bad place, when I shift it to, I am a place through which the district is operating, how do I then deliberately work to change what I'm seeing as mistreatment? How do I engage with students in a way that genuinely looks at them? And I say this, you are the best expert on you. And I believe that's true for each of us. We are each the best expert. We are that center of knowledge that nobody else can know. No matter how close in relationship we are, they will never know everything that we know about ourselves. And all that we know about ourselves sometimes gets disregarded. And my goal as a school psychologist with my students is to stop that disregard. It's to call forward their wisdom, their knowledge, their expertise. So it's, again, instead of seeing myself as a hapless victim of a district which does things wrong, how do I take responsibility and make sure everything within my power is done with more justice, is done with more kindness, is done with more compassion? And for me, I find that energizing, rather than operating under a weight, under a burden of being victimized by a place that doesn't care for people. That place may still operate in a way that I scratch my head and say, why is this happening? But I do what I can. Okay, what does this have to do with the story of Jacob? Well, one of the things that I adore about the Torah is that so many of the characters are imperfect. The heroes in the Torah, you can read it through and you're like, wow, that person's not really the perfect hero. You know, you read some stories and you're like, this is clearly the hero. In the Torah, the people are flawed. Early on, Abraham and his wife, Sarah, they're flawed because they're an old couple and they haven't had kids. Within their community, that was bad. If you didn't have kids, there was a problem with you. And to get kids, Sarah handed over her maiden. And Abraham had a child with the handmaiden. And that child was named Ishmael. And later on, Sarah had a child named Isaac. So what is that? The wife has her husband have an affair with another woman and they finally get a child? Huh? Again, I just say, one of the things that I love about the Torah is that it has imperfect characters. And the thing that I love about that is that I know that I cannot ever try to speak about my own perfection. I am always wrestling with my own imperfections. So by the time we get to Jacob, Jacob was the younger born twin. And the younger born twin, in those days, the younger one didn't get the blessings that the older one received. But Jacob's mother played around and gave him this animal fur that he put on his arms. And his father was blind. So his father was going to be giving his final blessing to the boy. The final blessings. And they send the older brother off. And Jacob gets all the blessing. Now his brother Esau, you might imagine, was not happy. He felt that he had his birthright stolen from him. So Esau wasn't like, oh, my younger brother, you're so cute. You are the best thing in the world. Jacob had to get his buns out of there because he angered his brother, who was entitled to the blessing. And for whatever reason, in those days, it's not like the father could just simply say, "Oh, it was a mistake. I was tricked. I had the wool pulled over my eyes. I had the animal fur on your brother's arm, so he felt hairy like you instead of the smooth arms that he's got." So Jacob flees. And he flees to a place where he goes to his mother's brother. And his mother's brother has 4 daughters. And he just falls in love with the youngest daughter. Falls in love with her. And he makes the arrangement that he's going to work for 7 years to marry the youngest daughter. But the tradition in that land was not that you marry the youngest daughter. The tradition is you're supposed to marry the oldest daughter. So on the wedding night, he had the very same thing happen to him that he did to his father. So karma met him. So the next morning he wakes up and he's in the light of the thing and he's like, "Ah! You're not the one I thought I married."
I hate that when it happens.
And basically, in the story, he has to work another 7 years to win the hand of the one that he really loves. It is Rebecca. And now, clearly he's not having a terrible time with the woman that he marries because he has a whole bunch of children with her.
It was terrible.
He has a whole bunch of sons. And it's these sons, these children, that form the 12 tribes of Israel. So this Jacob is somebody who has been a little bit of trickster. And eventually, because of his kind of trickster ways, he alienates his father-in-law, and he has to hightail it away. So this is a repeating story. Now, do any of us ever find ourselves in repeating stories? That our circumstances that we have reenacted, this relationship I had with this girlfriend ends up looking very much like this relationship I have with this girlfriend, ends up looking very much like this relationship I'm having with my wife, which all ended up being problematic because the fact was that I didn't know myself well enough to say, hey, I'm queer. I'm really not designed the way that I can genuinely regard this woman as the expression of the divine. And I could keep being the victim that I don't know why they don't like me the way that I'd like to be liked. Well, here's the deal, it was in me. As a queer, I wasn't honest about what I was and what was needed for me. And I say all this to be able to say I totally get Jacob, because like Jacob, I wasn't always honest. When that girl was asking, well, why don't you kiss me? Why don't you caress me? You know, my response was, I'm Catholic. And good Catholic boys aren't supposed to get physical. And yet, she was Catholic and she had been very physical with another guy who was also Catholic. And she's like, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. And it literally took me until my second daughter was born that I could finally say, oh, it's because I'm really not interested in any of that. Which isn't your fault, it's mine. I didn't know it. Again, I say this because sometimes the notion of coming into the world and playing and being playful and joyful, we can have all kinds of obstacles. Because we can be stuck with the notion that the world is very serious. And if we don't have a clue to who we are, the world is going to be much more serious. And we cannot easily engage with joy that is available because we're so busy with the trauma of the world. We're so busy with the heaviness in the world. I can't imagine that any of us haven't gone through times that felt heavy and hard. A country of people fleeing their country cannot feel light and easy. Being in this kind of nowhere land, in terms of how do we respond? How do we respond to a country invading, to a country bombing civilians, taking out their homes, cutting them off from food, cutting them off from energy? Again, I don't know about you, but if I'm without energy for a day, I'm going to be kind of grumpy. You know, the notion of not access to hot water. I mean, who doesn't like the access to hot water? Who doesn't like the access to a toilet? Who doesn't like the access to all of these kinds of things that we take for granted as part of our everyday routines? And yet for this whole country, and it's a big country, it's not like this is it's not like this is New Jersey. It's not like it's this little spot. It's not like Rhode Island. It's a big place. And there are lots of people involved, and there are lots of people who are being harmed. And their leader is saying, help us, help us, help us. And the opposition is saying, if anybody helps them, I'm going to declare war on you too. And you've seen what I've done. I bring forward the notion of Jacob because as Jacob was fleeing his second time, as he was fleeing from his father-in-law, because he figured out a way to cheat his father-in-law the same way he figured out a way to cheat his brother and to cheat his father. He was really good at cheating. But the thing about cheating was it didn't make him beloved in the hearts of the people that he cheated. They weren't like, oh, you're so cute. You're just the best thing ever, Jacob. It's like, ugh. And Jacob, who was fleeing, had his 4 wives, and he had his 12 children, and his 12 children had, some of them had partners and stuff. It was a big troop that was wandering across. And he was hoping to go back home to the area where his brother Esau was, the brother who he had last seen with a pitchfork in hand saying, if I ever see you again, you're out of here. So on his way going back, in the story he encounters an angel. And it's never really clear in the book, is it an angel, is it the divine, what is it? But the fact is that Jacob wrestles this angel all night long. Jacob was finally willing to wrestle what he had been running from. He was finally willing to get that close and be that engaged. And in that process, in that closeness, to finally get released, God or the angel breaks Jacob's hip to get out of it. That's how tightly they were held. They were inextricable. And it took getting broken to get apart. And sometimes we have to get broken to reclaim who we really are. Because in that story, Jacob had been fooling with the truth. And finally, wrapped that tightly with the divine. He was broken and he was renamed. He became Israel. He went from being Jacob to being Israel. How many of us feel like we've gone through experiences where we've been broken, and that being broken renames us? It gives us a new identity. It creates a new who we've been. So today, somebody identified that they prefer to be recognized as Gwen rather than another name. It's a constant process to find who we are. And my invitation with this notion of wrestling with the divine and in this notion of play is, what if we look at how we engage as play? What if we look at those places in our lives and we bring joy to it, rather than being victims of a harsh, joyless situation? What if we look for the joy? The notion in today's talk was playing Twister with the divine. I saw a video, it had little kids and they pulled out the plastic sheet for the Twister. And these kids were all like, they've never seen anything like it. Because kids nowadays, you know, as soon as they're able to put something in their hand, they're on video. And Twister is a very non-video kind of thing. Twister is not at all remotely video. Now I'm sure that pretty soon Twister will be videofied. I'm sure there will be a game where you can be doing Twister, and it will figure out that, you know, your left foot is on the red and your right hand is on the blue. But I don't think they got that yet. And when they showed this Twister to the little kids, they approached it in all kinds of ways. Some of them laid down and they just kind of meandered across the mat. And one of the kids took the spinner and goes, "Oh, this is how we find out where we're supposed to go." And a couple of the kids, of course, were like, she spun it and she's like, "Right hand on red." And the kid is like, "Which is my right hand? How do I tell which one is my right one?" And, the one goes over and shows her the right hand. "Now it's left foot on green. What's my left foot?" And this is the same kid asking who was like the right foot. With Twister, there's a lot to keep track of. And with games, there's a lot to keep track of. And when we wrestle with the divine, there's a lot to keep track of. When we're playing Twister, the thing that we have to do is that we have to have a firm foundation. Twister doesn't work if you put it on the bed. Imagine trying to put it on a twin bed, and part of the thing is going to be falling over the sides. You have to set up Twister in a way that's going to be safe. So the notion with playing Twister with the divine is, how do we play the game on solid ground? I think the story with Jacob is Jacob had to be finally willing to go back to the place where he started messing things up. He has to be willing to go back and make amends. He had to be willing to clear the field, to be able to say, "I'm going to stop blaming my brother who was a big grump and own what I did," which was, I took the blessing. I sent you away so that I could get your blessing. And while I really wanted the blessing, I'm sorry that I mistreated you. So for Jacob, who became Israel, part of it was identifying his part in what happened. To get the ground right, we have to see our part in things. And again, we can play an experiment. What does it cost us to imagine that we have a part? My proposal, and Reverend Pamela, who spoke several weeks ago about forgiveness, said that imagining that we have some part in it lets us act from a place of power rather than simply being the victim. So even if it's a new made-up story,
Preach. Sorry.
we're able to claim something and we're able to move forward in a way that we weren't able to do before. Make a foundation of being who we genuinely are. And accepting that, and claiming it, and naming it.
It's always a good start.
The next thing about Twister with God, Jacob wrestling with God, was it was up close and personal. I talked earlier about the notion that God is this distant thing that's gazillion miles away and is up there in heaven with an abacus and keeping track of our good and our bad and our mistakes. It's kind of like Santa Claus, just keeping track of who's being good and who's being bad. And this notion that there's some distant force or factor that is actively, distantly engaged. Twister is personal and up close. When the kids finally got it, they were overlapping. Their legs were next to each other, their arms were next to each other.
Go on.
Yeah. When we decide to live, closeness is something that offers us something that aloneness doesn't give us. And that closeness can come in any number of forms. We might have been given directives about what closeness should look like. My closeness directions were clearly that when I grew up, I should get married to a woman, that I should have children, and that I should be happy working for building a family. How many of us receive directives about what is the way that we should live? And when we followed those directives, it ended up being total shite. And it's like, I'm really not pleased with this, with your recommendation. And again, we can take the position of, you didn't know me, and you told me to do this, and I've been miserable because of you. But that doesn't enrich us. That doesn't build our joy. That doesn't build our freedom. That makes us feel bound. That makes us feel like it lets us give all our power away to that other person. What is it to recognize and celebrate our own power? To plant our hand firmly on that red circle, our right hand on that red circle, and our left foot on that blue circle, and to let ourselves be situated
Sorry, just kidding.
and to
Never mind.
live in
Don't
it.
on me. Preach. Right on.
We know who we are, and we may choose where to be.
Hallelujah.
So, first point is lay a foundation.
Okay.
Lay the foundation in truth. The second point is be prepared to be up close and
Oh, I'm
personal.
prepared.
And if up close and personal hasn't worked, let's be willing to give it another try until we find the way that works best for us. Until we find the way that reflects who and what we genuinely are. The third piece that I want to speak about with playing Twister with God and the story of Jacob and the circumstances we are in is be ready to laugh. Twister is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous game. There's no time in our lives where we're all going to have to put our left foot any damn place. Or our right hand any particular place. But a game is a way of engaging with the world that lets us act differently. A game lets us engage more playfully. What does it cost us to become ready to laugh? There's a vulnerability. So I'll acknowledge the cost of that vulnerability. But the readiness to laugh, the readiness to look for joy, to be on the prowl, to be on the hunt for joy, sets us moving in a different direction. It lets us engage differently than if we establish an expectation that I always have to be serious. Because only serious people get what they want. And only serious people, here's the thing that's kind of ironic, only serious people are happy because they get what they want.
I'm not sick. I smoke cigarettes.
How many times
I don't have any smoke.
does seriousness actually feel fulfilling? Seriousness can come as a terrible weight, as a terrible burden. And again, I can't speak to anybody else, but just being with yourself for a minute and think about how when you felt burdened, how heavy it was, how serious it was, and what happens when I have a friend and she and I were figuring out we had this case that had to be closed. And it couldn't be closed properly because there was a whole part missing. And my way to respond to it was to just talk about how this situation was adorable. It was just adorable. And using that word, and I said, have you ever seen the Shriners commercial? Where those little children are talking about, and if you donate, you get this adorable blanket. So for us, we're using the word adorable as a key word that I am going to find the joy here. I am going to find what's light here, no matter what's happening. So our key word is adorable. We're gonna let ourselves find what's adorable, even when it's hard to find. It's adorable that this person couldn't figure out what was really needed. Rather than being victimized, oh my gosh, we're being bombarded with emails from this. And the people aren't happy because it's just adorable. That gave us a new way to be with it. To be freer, to be lighter. To laugh. One of the teachers in training starts every class with a joke that she's heard from one of her from either her 7-year-old or her 4-year-old. And the joke that she shared the one day was, why can't a nose be 12 inches long? And the daughter's answer is, the nose can't be 12 inches long because a nose can't be a foot. Of course a nose can't be a foot. That's silly. The access to joy is as close as our breath if we look. The process of joy, the process of play, is about deliberately taking the time to look for it. We're never going to find joy if we aren't looking for joy. We're never going to be present to it. Ernest Holmes wrote in Take Your Troubles Away, if you would know the spirit of joy, we must be joyful. Are we going to be joy repellents or joy attractants? Ernest Holmes also wrote, it should be considered good and right to live and to enjoy living, to be well, happy, and to express freedom is in accord with divine law and wisdom. One of the other things I want to share is from Teilhard de Chardin. Joy is the infallible sign of the presence of spirit. Joy is the infallible sign. I don't know about you, but I know that every time I see Mount Rainier in the distance, there is just such a sense of awesome joy. Look at that. Look at that magnificence. I get it too, as I walk to school, I can walk and I can see the Olympic mountains. And depending on when I'm walking, they might have snow on them, or they might be all melted away, the snow, and they're just these the volcanic range is there. And joy doesn't have to be in the distant mountains. It can be, there's this commercial on TV where this little girl finds this little flower coming up through a crack. And she and her dad make a point of going to it and watering it, and eventually they transplant it to this place. And you see them, what you know is years later, and it isn't just the one flower anymore, it's this whole bed of flowers. Joy can be as close as that little dandelion that has found its way. That is that bright, sunny yellow. And then it's that almost impossible to resist set of flowers that when you blow on it, it just goes away. And rather than be the grown-up that's like, oh, I don't want to be spreading those seeds, that's a bad thing because then I'm going to have a whole bunch more dandelions and they'll be really deeply rooted. It's like, what is it to just play and to let those seeds blow. Because the fact is they're going to blow anyway. And no amount of my worry, no amount of my sense of burden is going to get rid of all the dandelions. There's the expression that a weed is where we see the flower. I don't know how many of you know it. There's the story of the Little Prince. And the Little Prince is on a planet, and he has this special relationship with a rose on that planet. And he leaves the planet, and he comes to our planet, and he sees that the rose that he thought was so unique and special and wonderful, there's a whole bunch of roses on this other planet. But he's taught by a little fox that rose was unique and special because of his relationship with that rose. The fox said, I'm going to teach you how to tame me. And by taming me, I become yours. And you become mine. Play is life and us taming each other. That we know life. And that we become more and more connected with it. Like the Little Prince and the fox. The fox said, I will come to expect you at that particular time. And you will come to expect me at that particular time. And that's what you and your rose had. You had that special relationship. What if we were to imagine that we could have more special relationships with so much more in the world rather than so much less? What if we are to look at the courage of the outspokenness of the Ukrainian president as a source of inspiration rather than a source of guilt? What if we are to just check and watch how we respond? Are we responding from a place of joy, from a place of gratitude? That place of joy and gratitude is the place of play. When we were kids at school, how many of us thought of recess as our favorite time? That getting away from the work was the reward for the work.
Why?
As grown-ups, how many grown-ups are like, the weekend is here, woo! We are automatically, but like we're instinctually inspired by the notion of play.
Oh, there's spiders in here.
We don't really have to teach children, babies, how to play. They figure it out. And they can play with virtually anything. I mean, I can remember giving my 2-year-old a gift, and the thing that was the most exciting of all of the gifts was that darn box. Being able to get into the box and get out of the box and get into the box and get out of the box. It was 100 times. And the other things that have been much more expensive, much more we thought were going to be interesting, did not enter the play cycle of our 2-year-old.
Yeah.
We all have a natural gift to know how to play. We all have a natural inclination for joy. So the invitation in the notion of the story of Jacob and in the story of playing Twister with God is that joy is as available as our breath. We may not always see it, but what if we always look for it? What if we choose to be seekers of joy rather than simply recipients of worry and simply recipients of heaviness? What if we keep our eyes open to imagine that there's more? So that's my invitation. Let's be on the lookout for joy and play. I'm gonna conclude today's talk with a shared song by a woman named Faith Rivera. And she does this song called God Is. And I'm trying to figure out how to make this smaller.
Escape.
Escape.
Spelled just like escape.
Sorry. That did not do it. Ah, there it is. There, we can exit you, and now we can go to you. Ah.
Can I ask a question? Where's
Sure.
that from?
That was Faith Rivera,
Where is it?
and that was at Agape.
Well, in what town?
Pardon?
Is it in what town in America is that?
Oh,
Los Angeles. Okay, thank you.
outside LA, yeah.
Outside LA. Good enough. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I thought it was San Diego, perhaps. No, we're done here. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, that was a joyful experience.
Sure was.
Actually, I love that song, and she's an awesome artist and person, and all that good stuff. And I want to thank you, Reverend Vaughan, for the talk today, for bringing play into the center of into the mix of it all. I personally take life way too seriously, and I have to remind myself that I'm a little too serious sometimes. But what is so refreshing is when something happens and I just burst into laughter. And the feeling that you get when that happens, everything else seems to disappear. It's that what happens when the body laughs and every part of your being is into it. I mean, the worries and woes and everything around doesn't really matter in that moment. And to be present in the here and now, and something I love the part about wrestling. I'm not sure if this is the way I said wrestling with ourselves and with our inner selves and with our inner demons. That can be an ongoing thing. But to wrestle with them is to get to know them and to take the choice of whether to keep them or cast them away. So in that, I just want to thank everybody for being present here in whatever form you are present, whether it's through the ethers or whether it's in person. We appreciate your presence, and your presence is a gift. It's a gift to the center. It's a gift to each person that's taking part. And in that, I just want to say that in that song with Faith Rivera that God is, I am, we are. It's that simple. It's really that simple. That God is, I am, we are. We are one, we are love, we are joy, we are peace. We are whatever we choose to be. To take that and to be that. And in that, find the play, find the fun, the joy. And so I give thanks for everyone being here, and I just want to remind everybody that next either Saturday night or early Sunday morning to move your clock 1 hour ahead, which I wish they'd settle on just staying on one time, but
You're in Indiana, they don't do
Yep.
Spring forward.
And let's see, what else is there? Other than our annual meeting, which will be taking place on Zoom only after service on the 27th instead of the 20th. We have to be flexible and find play in being flexible. And so, thank you for all being here, and we'll be here next week, same time, same bat station.